let's talk about The Pale Man. I can't speak for everyone, and the Oscars put a lot of emphasis of Guillermo Del Toro's most recent film, Shape of Water, which won not only Best Picture, but Best Director, an achievement that isn't to be taken lightly. Guillermo has a repertoire of movies and TV shows that he's worked on, all emphasizing the connection of beast and man, primarily the emphasis of man as it correlates to beast. Crimson Peak, Kronos, Blade 2, Hellboy 2, and, of course, Pan's Labyrinth. Much like Frankenstein could be a standing idea for the detached and unforgiving god complex of creator to beast, or the more comic book adjacent idea of the X-Men being a stand-in for minorities. Guillermo understands that what is pivotal in making a monster is a commentary associated with that monster, and how it reflects ourselves, or in the case of this movie, what it represents to the main characters. The Pale Man made his appearance in his 2006 modern fairy tale classic, Pan's Labyrinth, or El Labyrinth del Fauno, which literally translates to Labyrinth of the Faun. He instantly became the most recognizable character of the film, even outshining the true villain of the film, Captain Vidal. What makes the Pale Man click? What is it about him, besides the eyes in the center of his fucking hands, that says, this guy is a villain? Because anyone can look scary and terrifying, but what made him such a landmark character in horror, like Chucky? Or Frankenstein? Or Jason, in any number of his film debuts? It's all in the imagery and the presence of the character established in the film. Because as quickly as we're introduced and traumatized by this monster, he's gone. And we don't talk about him, or see him again. So let's take a quick dive into the Pale Man. What is he all about? Let's break down the scene. We are introduced to the segment in question with a very Alice in Wonderland-like design and inspiration. It's a hole in the wall made by a chalk outline. It's a very childish way to emphasize age of the subject matter we're dealing with. Chalk is associated with hopscotch. It reminds us of a symbol of childish glee and joy, something that's about to be quickly taken away from her, but we'll get to that in a second. Ophelia then drops down through the hole into what could be passed as a Gothic-styling cathedral hallway, with these aged-old brick columns and light shining through the little windows, which immediately sets off this feeling of she's nowhere near home, and she's not supposed to be here, as the scene clearly presented as her room being a dark, secluded place, into this open, brightly lit room, illuminated by the sun no less. She turns the corner, she happens upon the dining room, this decadent, gorgeous, fire-illuminated room, with this table full of jello, full of fruits such as cherries and grapes, whole glazed hams, and full pitchers of what I assume to be fine wine. And then we see him, this pale-skinned, saggy, eyeless man with snake-like nostrils and veiny hands that end in what looks like painted black pointed digits. And before him, where traditionally the utensils would be, are two round spheres, and upon closer inspection are clearly his eyes. Ophelia looks up and sees these beautiful but haunting paintings that describes what's being done here. There are unlucky, hopeless, crying children, and the paintings make no effort to hide what he does. The Pale Man butchers, eats, and devours them in quick succession, leaving nothing but a huge pile of shoes. Although it was difficult to see, behind the man is a roaring fireplace, with these guards along the mouth of the hearth, and two smoke holes in the shape of ram's horns towards the top of the room, giving the image of a ravenous horned beast with huge fangs, roaring fire and insatiable appetite. Ophelia opens the little door and pulls out a dagger, this golden, ornate dagger with the image of the fawn along the hilt. She has to leave now, but she's gone without a real meal for a while now, and throughout the film she's constantly being ordered by her mother, her stepfather, Captain Vidal, the fawn of the Labyrinth, by Mercedes the cook. Her latest order is to not drink or eat anything in this room. But what is a grape? What is a single grape? The man has no eyes, and he hasn't moved an inch since she's arrived. One bite. That's all she wants. And he awakens. Like the creaking and cracking of an old machine that's been jump-started. A single breath of fresh air, as if he's been holding it in until he can finally have a moment of respite and take in that dense air. He takes those utensils, puts them in the center of his hand, and begins to eat his meal. He grabs the two fairies and devours them hungrily. They didn't eat anything. Hell, they tried to stop her from eating those grapes. But no, Ophelia made the mistake, and those two had to pay for it with their lives. Lips dripping with blood, Ophelia watches firsthand the consequences of her actions, which leads to the death of these two fairies, who were tasked with protecting and leading her through this place. Ophelia runs away, only just managing to barely escape with her life. With two of the fairies dead, an order disregarded, and a stolen knife in hand, she ends this trial with not a sense of victory, but a sense of loss. She lost this time. The imagery here is reimagined from an earlier shot in the film, one where Vidal is sitting at the head of the table discussing a clean and pure Spain, rationalizing that handing out single ration cards for families is to stop them from giving food to the guerrillas that he's fighting. As they eat in excess and indulge in pleasures rather than eat out of necessity like the peasants they're damning right now, the priest demonstrates absolutely no ill will to the harsh treatment and handling of the situation. God has already taken care of their souls. Their bodies hardly matter to him. Was this said in approval of Vidal's brutal tactics? Or maybe somehow convince Vidal that their eternal lives are saved, and that their deaths won't cost them paradise? The whole movie is in Spanish, and the inflection of his voice, I cannot read it. Given the indulgence of food, the fact that Vidal makes no effort to sound conflicted in his war against these guerrillas, and his wholeheartedness to kill them all if absolutely necessary, I'd say the priest is in the camp of simply not giving a fuck what happens to them. Who cares? Let me drink my wine. Pale Man has a lot of different interpretations to what exactly he is, including one from the director himself, and all of them originate from a position of power. Personally, I feel two interpretations are founded and implemented heavier than others I've heard about. One can be a metaphor for either the corruption of innocence through the position of violence, or more literal, devouring the masses by oppressors, namely military and religion organizations. I feel more inclined to talk about the latter because it's less about the theme of growing up that's present throughout the film as a whole. So I'll begin with that, as I feel like I need to explain myself more with this one. There's no mistake in the direction of the scene that implies that the Pale Man is a representation, or at the minimum has a correlation to the figure and character of Vidal, who shares the spot at the head of the table. The brutal and definitive actions needed to end conflict that they both demonstrate. And the fact they're both antagonists to be faced, and both have issues with our protagonist, Ophelia. Where the religion comes into play is a reverence of the scene. The whole film could have been the basement of a cathedral. The murals are so connected to ancient drawings of Renaissance acts of violence in the name of God. The fact Ophelia could represent the masses who dabble in the delicious banquet that faith can provide, be devoured by the manifestation of greed in the church, who are willing to take everything from their patrons in the illusion of the riches they'll never receive or be able to partake of. Or it could be an allusion to the manifestation of a military state, who entices the naive with gifts of forlonging and substance just to survive for a few moments, like Ophelia eating the grape, just to be taken for all they're worth. The Pale Man had no issues devouring Ophelia, right down to her shoes. The children of the morals are not seen as healthy young lads and lasses. They look hungry. They look poor. The disenfranchised that can be eaten and used by these people of power. That's the first interpretation that I can read. The second one I believe is more in line to the theme of the film overall, this changeling fantasy. There's the former idea that I had, in which the corruption of innocence with the brutality of life. Ophelia is this young girl whose identity is established by her love of fantasy and her belief that she's living a changeling story. She faces the trials that test her grit and her commitment, but nothing like the Pale Man, whose centers are on a very real and very deadly threat to her. Much like the jump into adulthood, it can be dangerous and is often met in unfortunate circumstances. Death of a loved one, diseases, recessions, homelessness, abuse, trauma, anxiety, All these things could be one's personal pale man. And it'll feel like taking the bite of a grape, of a fruit, that she was forbidden to eat. The fruit of knowledge parable is poignant and powerful here. She eats the fruit, and then she is faced with the gravity of her situation. She is forced to handle herself, and take care of herself, or perish, because that's how the world works. I incline to lean more towards this interpretation of the Pale Man, because it feels more grounded in the lesson the overall story is trying to provide. Guillermo Del Toro, back in 2017, seems to favor the oppression idea presented here. As shown in this tweet, these are the Pale Man's times. It's not accidental that he is A, pale, and B, a man. Not to dictate what the director of the film meant and what he didn't mean to say, Guillermo del Toro wants to say the Pale Man represents oppression on the masses, and that's legitimate. He's well within his rights to say that. But as a observer, I see him as more of an interpretation of the harsh, encroaching reality of adulthood. And I just think that goes to show how well written, how well rounded this character is. The Pale Man is a deeply complex and realized monster. He's a being that represents absolute horror. It's horror with a purpose. I'd like to thank you all for stopping by, and I hope you all enjoyed the show. And I'll see you next time. See you later.